The sun was setting in shades of rust and melancholy over the Maplewood farm, painting the dry fields with a hue of orange and purple, as if the sky itself was on slow fire. The broken fences, slanted like old bones, cast long shadows that blended with the tall, dry weeds. The wind, rough and constant, carried the harsh rustle of dry cornstalks, but also something deeper, an almost imperceptible sound, like an ancient murmur traveling with the air. Etham, a young amateur historian with an almost reckless curiosity for local legends, parked his dusty old pickup truck near the fallen fence. The engine wheezed before it died, as if even the machine felt it didn't want to be there. The farm stood there, immense and empty, abandoned for almost 60 years. A decrepit monument to the relentless passage of time. The dark, splintered planks of the main house seemed to vibrate at the touch of the wind. The sound was not simple. There was a somber, almost human tone that sounded like a distant lament. He took a deep breath and felt a shiver run up the back of his neck. Since he was a child, he had heard stories about Maplewood Farm. They said the Smith family, who lived there, had disappeared on a cold winter night, leaving behind only a legend, an agonizing scream that echoed across the property on full moon nights. And, according to the elders, that scream always came from the old granary, the tallest and darkest structure on the farm, visible even from the entrance gate. The main house stood there, its door ajar, creaking on rusty hinges as if to invite him in. But Etham ignored it. Something deeper, almost a primitive instinct, told him the true danger was in the barn. He started walking, the dry weeds crunching under his boots and releasing a pungent, almost burnt smell. With each step, the air seemed heavier, saturated with mold, dust, damp earth, and something else. A rancid, metallic smell that he couldn't immediately identify, but which awoke in him a sense of deep, almost physical revulsion. The temperature dropped abruptly. The silence became so solid that he could hear his own heartbeat, irregular, accelerated, as if it reverberated across the entire field. The granary was before him, rising like a gigantic coffin. Its black planks, corroded by time, resembled rows of rotten teeth. At the top, a broken window let out an icy wind that seemed to be watching him. The large door was ajar. Inside, there was only darkness, a void so dense it seemed to absorb the little light of the night. Etham turned on his LED flashlight. The beam cut through the heavy air, revealing thick spiderwebs, so dense they looked like cloth. The dust danced slowly in the light. On the floor, dark stains, old, dry, spread like irregular shadows. The smell was now unmistakable, ferrous, of dried blood. He felt his mouth go dry. He swallowed, but the saliva was as rough as sand. It was then that he heard it. A low, dragging sound. A hiss, almost imperceptible at first, coming from the floor above. The flashlight beam wavered, trembling. The hiss grew louder. It was accompanied by an irregular scratching sound, like long nails scraping wood. He approached the narrow stairs that led to the attic. The steps creaked, as if complaining about his every move. The air there was colder, damp, almost sticky. At the top, the beam of light revealed something that made Etham's blood run cold. Straw dolls, but not ordinary dolls. They were grotesque, hanging in the center of the attic by old ropes, swaying slightly like bodies in a hanging. Each had torn, dirty clothes and button eyes, sewn with thick, dark thread that seemed to follow him. Some had abnormally real human proportions, and in some of them, strands of dried human hair were mixed with the straw. The hissing came from one of them. It swayed slightly, even without wind. On the floor, a pile of old children's objects, a headless porcelain doll, a broken spinning top, a wooden truck missing a wheel. Beside them, a frayed diary lay open. The first pages had innocent, childish handwriting, but the last ones were scribbled with shaky, desperate strokes. August 27, the Shadow Man came again. He said he's going to take me to play with the others. I don't want to go. He has big eyes and a bad smell. Mom, Dad, help me. I hear the screams in the granary. They are coming for me. The window is open. The wind is here. The date was the same as the Smiths' disappearance. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and went out. The attic plunged into a darkness so dense it seemed material. An abnormal cold took over the air, penetrating flesh and bone. The scratching sound came again, closer, behind him, and then a lament, not from the wind, but from something alive, a dragging, agonizing, childish sound. Whispers arose from all sides, in children's voices, calling for Mom and Dad. A wet sound of flesh being torn, bones cracking, echoed in the darkness. Something brushed Etham's neck, cold, sticky. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. His legs felt as heavy as lead. Sharp claws grabbed his shoulder and pulled. The diary fell to the floor, and the sound of multiple footsteps began to approach. The diary hit the floor with a dull thud, but the echo that followed seemed to come from much farther than the attic. Etham didn't dare to turn around, but the cold on his back increased, as if something immense was leaning over him. His breathing became shallow. He felt the air being pulled from his lungs, as if the darkness itself wanted to absorb him. Then came the first touch. An icy, thin, long nail slowly traced his shoulder to the base of his neck. The contact was so light it felt more like a whisper of ice on his skin, but the sensation burned him inside. The children's voices, which had previously cried and called for their parents, began to laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laughter you hear when something bad is about to happen, an anxious and hungry sound. Etham spun the flashlight in his hand, trying to make it work. The repetitive click echoed in the attic like a useless shot. For an instant, it flickered, and in that brief flash, he saw. Behind him, in the darkest corner, there were crouching forms, too small to be adults, but too distorted to be children. Their heads hung to the side, and their limbs were long and thin like dry branches. Their eyes, huge, round, reflected the light for a second before everything returned to darkness. The hissing and scratching returned, now all around him, coming from all directions. He backed away, tripping over the straw dolls hanging from the ropes. As he touched them, he realized some were warm, as if something still lived inside them. A dry sound, crack, rang out behind him. It didn't sound like wood breaking. It sounded like a dislocated joint, a neck being twisted. The laughter of the voices increased. Suddenly, something grabbed his ankle. Etham fell to his knees, hitting his shoulder against the old wooden floor. He felt his skin being scratched, torn. A warm liquid ran down his leg. He tried to crawl away, but the pull was stronger. Cold, bony fingers wrapped around his leg, and he felt each knuckle sink into his flesh, passing through muscle as if it were wet paper. A scream escaped his throat, finally, but it was lost in the heavy air. The flashlight beam lit up again for a second, illuminating the faces of the things surrounding him. They were children, or something that used to be children. Pale faces, brittle skin, mouths sewn into smiles that did not match the empty eyes. One of them opened its mouth, the stitches bursting, and a gush of a dark, thick liquid fell to the floor, exuding a putrid smell that made Etham gag. He kicked, trying to break free. He felt the rope of a doll wrap around his arm and tighten. The more he struggled, the tighter it got, cutting off circulation. In the corner, something large began to rise. It was taller than any adult. The silhouette dragged itself into the faint light of the flashlight and revealed an impossible body. A humanoid torso, but with animal legs, covered in damp hair, and a face, or what was supposed to be a face. Where there should have been eyes, there were only deep, pulsating holes, like living wounds. From the larger hole, something moved, as if something was peering from within. The creature approached, the floor creaking under its weight. With each step, the smell of rotting flesh grew stronger, mixed with a sweet, sickly aroma, like flowers left to rot in a tomb. The children's voices fell silent. Only the sound of heavy, irregular breathing filled the attic now. The creature stopped in front of him and tilted its head to the side, as if studying its prey. Etham tried to speak, but his throat was locked. He could only make guttural, almost inaudible sounds. Then, without warning, it grabbed him by both shoulders. The claws went through fabric, skin, and muscle until they touched his bones. The warmth of his own blood ran down Etham's body, and he let out a hoarse scream. The creature lifted him into the air as if he weighed nothing. The hanging dolls began to swing frantically, as if celebrating. "Come play," a voice said. It did not come from the creature. It came from inside Etham's head. He felt an unbearable pressure behind his eyes. Images began to flash in his mind. Scenes of the Smith family, surrounded by the same figures, being dragged into the darkness. The mother's last look, the father's screams, and the sound of the children's bones being broken like twigs. The creature brought its deformed face close to his. An icy breath, smelling of ancient earth and clotted blood, hit his skin. "Now it's your turn." The world began to close in. First his vision, then the sound. The last thing he felt was the cracking of his own bones and the weight of the darkness swallowing him whole. The next morning, the sun rose timidly, illuminating Maplewood Farm. Etham's pickup truck was still there, covered in dust. The granary door, ajar, swayed gently, creaking in the wind. But there was something new. In the attic, among the straw dolls, another doll now hung. It wore the same shirt Etham had worn the night before, and anyone who passed close enough could swear they heard, carried on the wind, the sound of childish laughter, mixed with a muffled scream.